Thank you all for joining us at a City and States webinar on a post-COVID Bronx. What have we learned? What does the future look like? I am really excited to have all of our panelists here today. It's also an exciting time in the, with national politics. In 2016, 94% of voters in the South Bronx voted for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. And now with a woman of Jamaican heritage on the ticket, I think we might get that up more to like 99% of voters in the South Bronx. So definitely keeping an eye on that. But we're always focused on local politics here at City and States. With that, I would like to thank our sponsor for today, Project Renewal, for sponsoring the event. They provide healthcare services and housing to people experiencing homelessness and those who have been homeless. So Project Renewal, thank you. I am Jeff Coltin, senior reporter at City and State, and it's my pleasure to be the MC, the moderator today at this Bronx webinar. We put out our Bronx issue this week. That included our Bronx Power 50 list. Shout out to Sandra Lobo and among 49 others on the list. 10 Bronx heroes like Daniel Barber, who never lets us forget about NYCHA residents. And we also had our top 10 elected officials on that list. And in fact, 5 of them are here with us today, of the top 10 elected officials in the Bronx. So I'd like to transition over right to them. Instead of me introducing them, I would love for them to introduce themselves. We talked about this ahead of time, so we'll go around and we'll say, in under 1 minute for all of you, please introduce yourself to our viewers, our listeners today. And given all the difficulties of the coronavirus pandemic and so many other issues, please just give us one reason to be optimistic about the future of the Bronx. Why be optimistic? And I'll start with whoever's on the top of my Zoom. So Amanda Septimo, please introduce yourself and give us a reason to be optimistic.
All right, that's a lot of pressure. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Septimo. I'm a candidate for state assembly in the South Bronx in the 84th Assembly District. And I'm really glad to be here today. So thank you to City and State for having me. I'd say that, the Bronx is ground zero for a lot of the issues that we see on the state level. Just about every statistic that you can think of, we've really got some of the worst of it. And with all of that struggle, I think comes an incredible resilience, an incredible beauty and grit that people just develop naturally. And so I think a reason to continue to be optimistic about the Bronx's future is because we always figure out how to make it work. And I think now more than ever, we're in a political moment where we're seeing leaders we're seeing this groundswell of leadership in a way that's really interesting and compelling, at least from where I'm standing. And so be optimistic because I think the best is yet to come.
Thank you. Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, please.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and good evening. Thank you to all my colleagues in government on the panel, City and State, Project Renewal. Grateful for the chance to talk about the Bronx and how we move forward as a borough. I think the Bronx is tough. We are fighters. We are, strong individuals, and we've been through a lot. We've been through the devastation, the burnout effect. We've been through the crack epidemic. And this is just yet another pandemic that we're seeing that has hit the Bronx in a real harsh way. We've seen thousands and thousands of New Yorkers lose their battle to COVID-19, as well as many Bronx residents. And many of them were older residents with underlying health conditions. And I think that speaks volumes to a lot of the challenges that we've faced through the years and decades, investing in infrastructure and health care access and stable housing. All of those issues are very relative. Why am I optimistic? Because the Bronx has been through a lot of tough times and dark days before, and our brighter days are ahead. Every setback that we have faced as a borough, we have confronted it and come back bigger and stronger and better than ever. And every setback in life is preparation for a comeback. And we've had a setback in the Bronx, but we are going to work together on our comeback, and we're going to come back stronger and more vibrant than ever. We have to do that for the sake of all of our residents, and certainly for those Bronx neighbors, families, and friends that we have lost to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation and to the work ahead. And everyone out there in the Bronx, remain tough, remain resilient, remain strong. We are united and we are in this fight together.
Thank you so much. Senator Biaggi, please.
Thank you. So first and foremost, I should say, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this panel. For those of you who do not know, my name is Alessandra Biaggi, and I have the great privilege of representing the 34th State Senate District, which includes a majority of the Bronx and a portion of Westchester County. To answer your question, I think we have to echo a lot of what we've already heard and we'll probably hear as a theme throughout today. But our entire community has faced enormous hardship over the last few months. I mean, the Bronx has had the highest COVID infection and death rates of any other borough, not to mention the economic devastation that this pandemic has brought on that we're going to probably live with and through for if not many, many months, maybe perhaps even years. And so from lost loved ones to closed businesses and families who have faced and are facing evictions as we speak, the impact of this crisis will be very long lasting. But despite all of the things I've just mentioned, and despite what sometimes often feels like a parade of horribles, I'm hopeful because what this moment represents is an opportunity and even a moral imperative in many ways to really take this moment and to transform the systems of inequality that the Bronx has really been plagued with. And not only do we have this opportunity, but we have the momentum in such an incredible way that I don't think that we've ever seen really in the history of the state. I think that there are so many new progressive leaders who are rising to the top, who are deciding to run in the borough, refusing to accept business as usual and the status quo. The system, I think, of politics that has really dominated not only this borough, but this whole state. And you could just link it all the way back to Tammany Hall. It's just not working anymore. I think, you know, there's a certain expiration date of things. And we're seeing not only in the Bronx, but especially in the Bronx, Bronxites who are demanding something different. And so, you know, necessary conversations about structural racism have come to the forefront at a time when the political winds in the Bronx are shifting. And so now it really is up to us to take that moment and to run with it. And so that creation of possibility and opportunity and really what the limits are here are making me, or the limitlessness, I should say, are making me very optimistic.
Thank you so much. Assemblyman, you next, please.
Good evening, everybody. It is so good to be here. And for those of you who live in the Bronx, you get it. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people listening tonight. I've lived in the Bronx all of my life. I've seen the Bronx. I've seen it up. I've seen it down. I've seen it come back up. I lived through the horrible days when crime was raging in the Bronx, when houses were abandoned, hundreds, thousands of them. In the 70s, in the 80s, things turned around. It didn't turn around by accident. It turned around because there was good leadership, not only elected officials, but people in our community. The Bronx turned around and is a huge success story. So the fact that we're down now, maybe we've been knocked down, but we're not out. And I know that we have the ability to turn things around again. I think of all the areas, perhaps in the country, the Bronx suffered the most during these past few months, but things are starting to happen again. And just look at the things that have happened in the past few months, the volunteerism, people pulling together, everybody pitching in just to turn it around. And you know, if you look at what's happened in the past 10 years, and I see our borough president has joined us, under his leadership and under the leadership of everybody working together, we know we're the best borough. We know, and there are 4 other great boroughs, but we are the greatest, let's be honest. And the only one on the mainland besides. I know based on our recent history, there's nothing that can stop us. There's nothing we can't do, and we are going to turn this around also.
Thank you so much. And Madam District Attorney, you finally. You're on mute, sorry.
Thank you so much for City and State for inviting me. To all the other panelists, thank you for being partners in the Bronx. I think as the district attorney for the last 4.5 years, and before that as a judge, 16 years, and basically as a daughter of the Bronx my entire life, growing up in public housing and going through to Bronx public schools, I get it, and I know that Bronxites get it. We are going to be better because we believe in ourselves. The Bronx is strong because the people in the Bronx believe in the Bronx that they live in. We fight as leaders, elected officials, as community leaders. We do what we can to make ourselves better, because if we don't, no one else will. So coming out of COVID, which hit us the hardest, we've been down before and we get up. The fires of the 70s, the crack epidemic of the 80s, the violence of the 90s, we came through all of that and we were set to be the safest city in the world. And now COVID hits and here we are back with the gun violence again. But you know what? We're going to get through this because people are tired of others taking advantage of the vulnerability of the Bronx that we have. It's an opportunity, this challenge, to now reallocate the resources to make sure we put more in the schools so that we don't have the school to prison pipeline. That's an investment in our community. We need to do more against the gun violence. We're inspired by mothers like Eve Hendricks, whose son died this year, 17 years old, on his way to St. John's University, but killed with gun violence. We have to hold accountable those people who are bringing violence to our community in the midst of the pandemic after we've gone through everything else. So we believe in our community. You talked about Danny Barber. You talked about these electeds that are here, our great borough president. We're going to do better because we believe we are better. We are better than this, and we're going to continue to do that. So that's why I'm always optimistic, because the Bronx is never down. We always get up.
Thank you so much. And yes, we will definitely be asking about gun violence later. But for a moment now, actually, I'm going to shift it away from our panelists and towards a special guest appearance from the face of the Bronx for the past decade. He's an inspiration to all of us who don't always agree with our own dad's politics. I'd like to give over the microphone to Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr.
Thank you, Jeff. And what's up, y'all? To all of my colleagues who are in government who are on, I just want to thank those of you who have spoken. Thank you for acknowledging some of the work that we've done. For those of you who are listening, and as it pertains and relates to this conversation, look, COVID has decimated and devastated us on many different fronts. Before I get to that, I want people to understand that since I've been elected my whole entire life, you know, the Bronx gradually has progressed. Life isn't perfect, but you think about what we've been able to accomplish around economic development. We went from 14% unemployment the first day that I took office, and pre-COVID in February, we were under 5. That was the lowest number of unemployment rate in the history of our borough. And it's not just that people got off the rolls. We had over 100,000 more Bronxites working at that moment than we did from the first day that I took office. And now, because of this enemy, coronavirus, that we can't smell or see, that we don't know where it's at, and you know, we were devastated in terms of the number of fatalities. The Senator Biaggi alluded to this earlier in her comments. If you look at the amount of death that the Bronx has seen over the last 4 months, I don't think in the history of our borough, if you take all kind of death, everything from natural causes to sickness to violence, whatever it is, and you add them all together, I don't believe there's been a 4-month period of time in the borough of the Bronx where we've lost over 5,000 lives like we've done over the last 4 months. So we've been hurt that way by losing loved ones. People are still mourning. We've been hurt from the amount of people who have contracted, like my sister, who was sick, who are still feeling the after effects of contracting this virus. Obviously, with the businesses shutting down and people quarantining, we went from 4.6% unemployment to over 25% unemployment now. So that's more than what we started out with 10 years ago. But look, whether it's politically, obviously people have different views of how we do the politics, but I remember some of us, when we didn't appreciate the way the organization was headed, we took over the organization. We were the Rainbow Rebels. And I remember when I first ran for the New York State Assembly, I ran against the organization. I was 22 years of age. When I first ran for district leader, I was 21. I ran against the Ramon Vélez machine. And so when I see that young people and energetic people, whether they do it through, you know, relationships with the Democratic organization, or whether they do it like Biaggi did it, and I see Amanda Septimo here and others, you know, it adds to the conversation. It adds to the energy. It adds to the creativeness of all of the things that need to be done now moving forward. So I appreciate that you guys are all panelists. I appreciate those that are listening. But in terms of being optimistic, hey, we were left for dead a couple of times. Whether, again, the fires, like the DA said, the fires that burned in the 70s, the crack epidemic, economic, you know, we've been through economic storms and we were able to bounce back. We were right there in the cusp of being the little engine that could. People were looking at us as the paradigm of how to reverse things around pre-pandemic. So what makes me the most optimistic, obviously, is the resiliency of the people of the Bronx, but that now we have this diverse, young, talented, intelligent, sagacious group of Bronx elected officials. And as some of us now are stepping out and getting off the stage, we got these folks who are on the stage now, some of them who are your panelists today. And I know that we've been able to take the Bronx to a certain level from the generation before us, whether people agree with it or not, and with all of its imperfections. But I know that this next generation of leadership and how talented it is really going to take us even to the highest level. So I congratulate all of the new elected officials. I congratulate city and state. Jeff, thank you for moderating this. And I congratulate all of my colleagues for being so forceful and understanding and realizing that in unity, hopefully, in unity as a borough, even with all of our disagreements, is the way that we're going to make sure that the city, state, and the federal government continue to respect the boogie down Bronx. So thank you all, stay safe, and I look forward to hearing this conversation.
Thank you so much, Borough President. Thanks for joining us, and really appreciate your words. For those of you like Senator Biaggi or you know, our future Congress member Jamal Bowman, who live and work on both sides of the Bronx-Westchester line, just want to give a quick advertisement. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., City and State is having a Westchester Region State Legislative Forum sponsored by AARP. I think we have Senator Biaggi joining once again tomorrow morning. So they'll be talking about all the legislative issues affecting Westchester County. But for now, we're focusing on the Bronx. And as was alluded to in the Borough President's remarks, you know, there's a lot of change in the Bronx lately. A lot of longtime elected officials have either been beaten in primaries in the past 2 years, or some of them are choosing to retire on their own. I want to now ask a question to everybody. You know, is the electorate changing in the Bronx and getting more progressive? Are the voters adopting these progressive policies? Or does it just happen that progressive candidates are running more effective campaigns than they either have in the past, or just trying new things and therefore getting elected? So that's a question to all of you, but I guess I will start with Senator Biaggi, who was one of those progressives who ran a campaign.
Got it. So, you know, I think that what is happening, and it's not just a phenomenon in the Bronx, it really is a phenomenon, I think, across the whole entire state, is something that I believe was brewing for a very long time, but that the 2016 election, and it's almost like cliched at this point to continue to say it, but it's true. The 2016 election made a lot of people realize that our democracy cannot be taken for granted. And so for those of us who felt a little bit hopeless when it came to the federal government, I think a lot of people started to look towards their own backyards, quite literally, and say, well, what are some of the issues, or what are some of the problems, and how can I be part of the solution? And so I think that elevation of consciousness collectively, with the fact that more people were engaged and involved, and, you know, not everybody wants to run for office. Some people just want to help and be part of the process. I think that organization and organizing collectively has led to so many young, progressive people of color elected to office in the Bronx and Westchester who are demanding more of our politics. And it's exciting. And not only are their voices incredibly valuable, but I think that what it really represents is that we need elected officials who are not beholden to any one interest or organization or machine. I say that even as somebody who has a label of progressive. I think that one of the most valuable assets that I hold with me every single day is my independence. And the more that we, I think, realize the value of that, it translates into the policies that we make every single day when we're inside that room. And it doesn't foster or fuel a business as usual type of status. And I think that even the world that we're living in is a world that is demanding way more than what was demanded of my parents' generation. And I talk about this with them all the time. And that's a great thing. We're seeing 14 and 15-year-olds who are asking about becoming a district leader when they become, the qualified or feel like they're ready to do it. I mean, this to me is like exactly what we want. There are almost 20 million New Yorkers. Our goal should be that every single New Yorker votes and is engaged. And so I think it's an exciting, incredible moment.
Amanda, I'd like to ask the same question of you. You have avoided a primary this year, but do you think the Bronx voters are getting more progressive, or is it just that different campaigns, different people running?
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I think progressive is a label that is really amorphous and like means one thing to another person, a different thing to another person. Some people have no concept of what it means. And I really don't think that Bronx voters are so driven by labels. I think that what's been happening is, I will agree with Senator Biaggi that it's something that's been brewing under the surface for some time. And I think citing the borough president's kind of incremental progress that we've made over these years is certainly important, but I think the Bronx is a really big place. And there's a lot of people for a long time have felt left out of some of the progress that has happened, right? So people who look around and hear that the Bronx is booming, that the Bronx is growing, that the Bronx is doing all of these wonderful things, but look around at their own situation and realize that their rent's only getting higher, their wages are still stagnant, their kids' school's getting worse. And that, I think, disconnect is really what has fed a lot of this movement. And so it hasn't really happened overnight. I think it's years and years of a slow drip of watching policies that are meant to improve people's lives on a daily really just not do that, no matter how well intentioned. And I think that coupled with some candidates who are comfortable saying, hey, things are not necessarily working the way they're supposed to. You put all those things together, and I think you've got people kind of returning this light to their eyes and saying, things in the South Bronx really don't have to be that different from things on the Upper East Side. That's not mandatory. Those are decisions. Those are policy decisions. Those are choices, and realizing that we can make different choices. And so I think that's really what's happened over these last few years that I think is really culminating right now, and hopefully will continue to happen over the next few years.
Sure. Now, a lot of these newly elected insurgents have definitely had large impacts on their legislative bodies. Like we have AOC leading the charge for a Green New Deal. We have Senator Biaggi leading the Ethics Committee in Albany. But Assemblymember Dinowitz, I want to ask you if you've seen changes within the Bronx itself, with politics on the ground or within the borough. Has this new generation of elected officials changed politics specifically within the borough?
The Bronx, as long as I've been around, the Bronx is always changing, always changing. It's not a straight line. Sometimes the changes are bigger than at other times. I mean, going back to the 70s, the Vietnam War helped drive a lot of change, brought people into politics. A lot of new people were elected. In the mid 80s, there were a lot of scandals that took place. So a lot of senior people left, other people came into office. We've had this phenomenon over and over again in the Bronx, change. And at the same time, we always go through demographic change. There was a time when the Irish were in great numbers in the Bronx, then Jewish people, more recently Puerto Ricans and Hispanics in general. Now, a lot of groups come in, a lot of groups move. There's always demographic change and political change. I think what's happened in the past few years, and I think bringing new people into politics, that's vitally important. And I think the biggest recruiter for the Democratic Party and for change has been Donald Trump, because that was the catalyst. That's what activated so many people. People were just so disgusted, and it happened as soon as he got elected. People just couldn't believe that a guy who lost by 3,000 votes, a lunatic, could become the president, and boy, was their judgment correct. So there have been a lot of changes in the past few years, and no one can ever complain if new people get involved in politics, because that's what we want. Will that continue? We'll see. I mean, I hope that that's something that is a steady line rather than, just up and down over time. But we could see that in the past few years, just up in Albany, and I know my colleagues certainly can verify that we've done a lot of good things in the past couple of years, and a lot of it's based upon the fact that we have some new energy that's there, new people there, and I just hope we can continue that as long as possible.
Thank you. And council member, you're planning on running borough-wide next year for borough president. I want to ask your thoughts on that. Do you think that the electorate in the Bronx has moved to the left, has grown more progressive, or is the change different there?
I think, again, to what Amanda said earlier, I really believe that people have always been driven by issues and not categories and statuses and titles. And I think everything is happening for a reason, and really during this season. It's really an exciting time for a lot of younger candidates, women and women of color, who are stepping up, running for elected office. They're being a part of a new wave in the political scene. They're change agents. They're the next generation of leaders. They're stepping up, talking about issues that everyday residents face. They are feeling the power of their voices. Every movement that you've seen in modern society, the civil rights movement, the LGBT rights movement, every movement was led by people and not politicians. And I think a lot of efforts that we've done, early voting, promoting the census, which is important to be counted. When you see the failure of this federal administration, people are stepping up. Climate change is real. Young people are talking about that. They're mobilizing, they're organizing. They're finally saying, I have a voice and I'm going to use it. And I'm tired of the same old, same old. The same process doesn't work for a different environment. And I think as you promote options like joining the community board as young as 16, providing early voting and absentee voting, and ways that people can be civically engaged, joining their local precinct council, the civic organizations. People are being a part of something and they're excited. And I think for many of us women and women of color, we're stepping up and running for positions that have never been ordained for us. So we're still making her story in 2020. In 2019, you have women that are running for seats that were predominantly led by older white men from many, many generations. And I think it's exciting, but I also see a lot of change that's happening around particular issues. People are fed up with what they see in their community: unstable housing, the quality of schools, lack of, healthcare, and so many things that we talk about in the Bronx, the infrastructure, mass transit, open space, the environmental justice issues we talk about. And I think the younger generation is mobilizing around these issues. And then when they are successful, they're moving on to the next issue. And we've always said, as we talk to our constituents, you're not the only individual going through that problem. There's a whole community that may be facing the same issue. So it starts from one place and then you move and it's transformational. So I think it's an exciting time in the Bronx for many candidates who are running, and they're stepping up and they are really designing a new wave of progressive leadership, and they're creative, they're innovative, and a lot of them are coming up with really great, energetic ideas that have never really been talked about, and they're putting a lot of that into action.
Thank you so much. Now I want to bring in the district attorney here. In your opening remarks, you mentioned the increase in shootings in the Bronx over the past few months. Now, if you got your news from certain sources, you might think that, that there's a massive crime spree, the murders are out of control. That's actually not true. I mean, murders are at historic lows, basically equal to last year. Rape is down from last year, assault and robbery. Basically, crime is consistent. However, shootings are up more than 50% over last year in the borough, really getting up to the number of shootings that we haven't seen in years. So I wanted to ask the district attorney, what can be done to stop that? And what role does the district attorney's office play in trying to decrease shootings in the borough? You're on mute, sorry.
Keep forgetting about that mute button. The district attorney's office plays a great role in that because it is my responsibility to keep the Bronx safe. That means holding people accountable who bring harm to the community. So my job is not only to prosecute people, but to work on prevention, not also prosecution, as well as to doing those things to make sure that people who are re-entering our community have resources so that they don't re-offend. So there's a number of things that my office can do. But first and foremost, I need the help of the community to make sure that we hold these people accountable that are picking up these guns. One, we have to stop the iron pipeline. That's getting the guns into the Bronx in the first place, because those guns are not being produced in the Bronx. I can tell you that. A lot of things are happening in the Bronx, but we're not making any guns. But people are picking them up and using them, and the community is getting hurt. And the thing is, I have to work with NYPD with all their strengths and challenges. They are my partners in making sure that we hold people accountable and keep the community safe. But equally as my partner is the community. And I need to meet people where they are to find out, why are these young people picking up these guns in the first place? And what can we do to solve their issues so that they can resolve their differences without a gun? When I was growing up, we didn't pick up guns to resolve. If you had a fight, there was a winner and a loser. And 10 minutes, we were going off to the candy store and, buying more candy and being friends, or going back on the, baseball field or basketball court or whatever to resume. Those things are not happening. People have been cooped up for 4.5, 5 months. They're out now. People are wearing masks. So it's like the old West. You're masked up, gloves, and people are settling scores thinking that they can get away with it. They cannot. And I need the community to help me identify these people, because what is happening that if somebody does a shooting, right, and we don't get to the person who caused it, if the person who was shot doesn't cooperate, what does that mean? One, the person who shot them is not being held accountable, but two, the person who was shot now looks to retaliate, which means there's an increase in the violence. And that's what's happening. That's the vicious cycle, unfortunately, that we're dealing with, is that people are not reporting it, they're not cooperating, and they're going out and trying to take matters into their own hands. We are working so hard with the Cure Violence community, the crisis management community, the hospitals, tenants associations, anybody who will, the elected officials. We all play a role in taking our neighborhoods back. And we need to send a message out there. And I'm sending this message out to the shot callers, to the people who are actually doing the shooting, to the people that are doing the investigating. I don't want to prosecute them either. I love them. I love that shooter as much as I love the victim. I love them more. I don't want to see anybody killed. And most importantly, I don't want to have to prosecute them, but I will, because my job is to make sure that the community is safe. But we can take care of this ourselves, working together with each other to identify those people, figuring out why. There's so much unaddressed trauma that has happened. Even some of these young people who are picking up the guns, when we do finally get them, when we find out the history and the background of some of the things that have happened to them, we almost understand why they are where they are. So now what do? That's what we have to do, is to address the trauma as it's happening so that they don't in the future become the next shooter. So there's a lot of work to be done. And again, resources in our community. Stop thinking that the DA and the police are the answer to everything. We should be the last resort, not the first resort. Give us the money for mental health so people who have those challenges don't end up doing something that hurts somebody and they come into the criminal justice system because they haven't had the behavioral health assistance that they need. People are addicted to drugs.
You've mentioned working with the NYPD, working closely with them. There's been some reporting that gun arrests are down like 2/3 this year. That the clearance rate for shootings is down. Can you just speak a little bit? What's the reason for that? Is there an NYPD slowdown?
Well, I mean, I can't say whether the NYPD is slowing down or not, but I can tell you one thing. Throughout COVID, we have been prosecuting cases. People have been getting arrested. The court has been open for us to prosecute. It may not have been physically open, but virtually, we have handled every arrest that has come through the Bronx, and we are still holding people accountable for that. Of course, we had a lot of changes in criminal justice reform right before COVID hit, and bail reform, and those things were working through the system as it was. But the system still works, and those needed reforms happen for a reason. I was in favor of them, and I was seeing them work through. So whether or not the police are arresting or not, I know that they can only arrest when they have the information that they need to arrest. I don't want them just arresting people without evidence. I need the evidence. So if there's a slowdown, I don't know. If there's a lack of arrest, some of it is because we're not getting people to cooperate. We need the cooperation so that they'll be able to bring me a case so that I can prosecute. But the numbers are, going up. But the key is to make sure that those arrests are fair and proper and just. That's what this criminal justice system should be all about. And I believe in a safer Bronx, and we can do that, but it has to be fairer justice with it as well. So that's the balance that I try to keep. And I think that we're well on our way to getting more people to understand that I can do the best I can to keep them safe when they're courageous enough to cooperate in order to help us hold those people accountable with the help of what the NYPD.
Thank you, District Attorney. Now, you mentioned cooperation. We're going to go all over the place on this conversation. So I want to talk about a different kind of cooperation, political cooperation. Amanda Septimo specifically, I've seen that Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie has been meeting with a lot of the newly elected, or at least the newly primary winners for the Assembly. I'm wondering if you have met with your fellow Bronxite yet, if you've gone up to have a meeting with Hastie.
Yes, I did. And it was a lovely meeting. I'm really excited to hopefully get through the November election and be able to join the chamber in January. I was a little apprehensive because I ran against the party in 2018 and again in 2020. And I was concerned that the politics might be prickly and make things uncomfortable. But the speaker was really gracious and made me feel really welcomed and reassured me that politics is really separate from the work. And I'm really excited to dig in.
Thank you. And can you give us a brief update? I saw like a rumor on Twitter that Carmen Arroyo might still be on the ballot in November. What's the update there?
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, Carmen Arroyo was thrown off of the primary ballot in June because of a fraudulent petition operation. The governor did open the opportunity for people to run independent ballot lines in November. I do know that Carmen Arroyo's team submitted a set of petitions. I suppose we'll find out on the 18th when the Board of Elections commissioners meet whether she will be on the ballot or not.
Coming up soon. Thank you. We will be paying attention. You mentioned the ballot, of course. Now I want to ask our two representatives in Albany here, Senator Biaggi and Assemblymember Dinowitz. I know you guys are actually working together on a bill that would hopefully fix some of the issues that we saw with primary ballots. I mean, so many people, their mail-in ballots were thrown out for various reasons. Some people like me requested an absentee ballot and then never received one and couldn't vote. So I would like to ask you two just an update. What's happening in Albany and what are legislators doing to make sure that voting in November is a smoother process than we saw for some people in June?
Well, several things are happening at once. There's legislation that Senator Biaggi and I passed in our houses that's sitting on the governor's desk now awaiting his signature, which would allow people to apply for absentee ballots for whatever reason, not just if they're sick or at school or out of town or whatever. And that's really important because a lot of people who want to get absentee ballots aren't sick. They just don't want to go out because of the virus. But there are other issues. The issue of whether or not an absentee ballot should be invalidated simply because the post office did not postmark the envelope it was sent in. That's absurd. My colleague, Assemblymember Bichat, passed the bill which says essentially that if the Board of Elections gets it the next day, it should count. And I have legislation to say 3 days, and 3 days because I think if somebody mails it out, there's a good chance the board won't get it anyway for 2 or 3 days. So that's one of the things we have to address. One of the other things we have to address is the fact that so many people did not sign the envelope on their absentee ballot. So in fact, I think the board is now talking about on their own, putting in big red letters, sign here, just like when you go to vote, you have to sign. Well, the same thing is true of the absentee ballots. I saw in my own district a number of absentee ballots that were invalidated, and some people I know, I didn't want to make them feel bad, but a lot of people lost their votes because of that. Not so much in the Bronx as compared to Brooklyn and Queens, apparently. But there should be no reason people should lose their votes for reasons like that. We should err on the side of counting votes at all times. So I think we're all going to continue to work on legislation to make that happen. I'm sure we're going to be back in session again in time to take further action. And if not, the governor can still issue executive orders to make some of these things happen.
I'll just add that in addition to what Assemblymember Dinowitz just said, there were a collective total of 9 bills that we passed in the Senate. Unfortunately, although fortunately, because it's still a lot, 7 of them passed both houses, 2 of them only passed in, 2 of those 9 only passed in the Senate. So we have 7 that have a potential to basically correct a lot of the wrongs that we saw on the June 23rd primary, which really just signals and signifies, and it's really important to say this so that there's an acknowledgement of this, that we really did fail to sufficiently plan ahead and to safeguard every single voter's safe access to the polls. The bill that I carry with Assemblymember Dinowitz is a bill that I introduced very early on in the pandemic on March 9th. And it's very simple. It just enables all New Yorkers to be able to vote absentee, which is the same and synonymous with vote by mail. I know sometimes that those 2 things can be confusing, but that they mean the same thing. And so that's an important point just to make very clear for everybody. And how does this happen? Right now, if you request an absentee ballot from the Board of Elections, an application, and you look at the 6 categories that you can select for actually being able to vote by mail, nowhere in those categories does it consider the moment that we're in, which is a moment where there is a potential risk of spreading disease, or a potential risk of contracting a disease that other members of the public can unfortunately contract. And so the point is just to simply redefine the term illness, to expand it so that it really does make sure that we can account for this moment in time. Why is this important? Because right now, if you were to look at that application and you did not fit squarely into one of those boxes and you checked a box because you wanted to vote by mail, you would be committing a felony. And so obviously that's ridiculous. And so what we're trying to do is make it not only easier for everybody, but most importantly, safer, because no one's health should be put at risk when we're talking about the right to vote. And just one final note on this, the November elections, I don't have to say to anybody, but because everybody knows this, this is the most consequential election of our entire lifetime. And so we've got to do everything we can now so that we can put all of the pieces in place, communicate it effectively to the public, and really do everything that we can to make sure that everybody gets their ballots on time, that the Board of Elections is sufficiently equipped and ready to deal with the volume that will be much greater than June 23rd, and to make sure that we are prepared in the state of New York for the November elections coming up.
Thank you so much. So just a reminder, we now have, sadly, only like 15 minutes left in this conversation. We do have a Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom. We have 27 questions already. I definitely won't be able to ask all of them, but I'm going to try and ask a couple. So anybody can go into the Q&A and you can thumbs up, you can upvote your favorite questions, and I'll try and ask a couple that are at the top towards the end of this. But to keep moving, again, quick answers, please. We only have like 15 minutes left. But I want to turn the conversation to Councilmember Gibson briefly to talk about all the building that's happening in the Bronx. We've seen lots of new buildings go up on the Harlem River waterfront, of course, in the Jerome Avenue corridor that helped upzone. You know, with you running for borough president and working on the council, I just want to know, does your ideal future of the Bronx include more residents? You know, would you like to see the Bronx's population go up to fit the demand, or stay as is?
Well, I think the reason why we have so many proposals and you see so much construction happening across the Bronx, most of that being residential, is because the population has already grown in the Bronx. We've seen a lot of displacement happening across the city, and the Bronx is the borough that's the northernmost tip of New York City, and we've seen a lot of our neighbors in northern Manhattan that are now living in the Bronx. And the Bronx is still affordable. I guess the question is affordable to who? That's why a lot of the efforts that we have embarked on at the City Council, working with HPD, the new term sheets, working on anti-displacement policies, right to counsel, universal access to prevent eviction, to focus on supportive housing, affordable housing, housing for seniors, LGBT seniors and youth aging out of foster care, veterans, everybody we have to try to take care of, because the shelter system continues to grow. And many of us have been, supportive of the efforts of the city, but we don't want the city to keep opening up brand new shelters in our communities. So the only way to fight against that is to build housing that really caters to the residents that are here. A lot of the housing that you see is housing either built on city-owned land, some of it's private, some of it's through HPD, HDC, the state agency, HCR, all these different acronyms. But the bottom line is housing has to be affordable. The lowest end of the spectrum, those that are making far below the federal poverty level, anywhere from 25 to 30% of the AMI at the lowest end, and it has to be mixed income. People have been talking about affordable home ownership opportunities for first-time homeowners so that our residents can build equity and not be renters for the rest of their lives, and build economic wealth, particularly in communities of color. I think we're more reminded during the pandemic with what we've seen with small businesses that are closing, they can't meet rent. A lot of them are subjected to landlords because they don't own their property. So we've tried to put in regulations for commercial tenants just as we do for residential. So there's a lot at stake, and the potential for displacement is always there. And I think that's why a lot of these big, large-scale projects, you do get a lot of opposition because people are very fearful of being pushed and priced out. But I say to my, colleagues, where do people go if you're pushed out of the Bronx? There's nowhere to go. And so the residents, the ones that have been here for a long time, that have survived the dark days, the disinvestments, the burnout, all of the different epidemics we've been through, they were here when the Bronx wasn't where we are today. And they have a right to stay exactly where they are as long as they want to. We shouldn't do these policies and construction projects that push our seniors and our families out. Most people are working, but they're not rich. And a lot of them have lost their income. They're falling behind in rent. So I think when you look at the future construction, there have to be incentives that stimulate the type of housing that we need. The term sheets, tax credits, incentives, other things that we have the ability as a government to control. We wish we could control some of the private land, but we're not able to do that through government action. So where we can on public land, through public-private partnerships. And then I also want to remind everybody, building housing is important, but we also have to look at building more schools and community centers and daycare centers. That has to be a part of the conversation too. It has to be neighborhood driven and not just housing, because all of the housing we're building, the expectation are new families with school-age children, and we want them to use the amenities in our communities, the supermarkets, the grocery stores, the bodegas, the farmers markets. So we have to do this from a neighborhood-driven plan as a way to stimulate the economy, but also cater to the demand and what the need is of the residents that we serve.
Can I jump in? Sorry, Jeff. I know we've only got a couple minutes. I'll be super quick.
Sorry, trying to be fast.
I really, someone mentioned in the chat, you've got to change the AMI to get real affordable housing. And I really want to one-up that. We've got an incredible delegation of New York Congress people. And I spent 4 years working with Congressman Serrano. In that time, we learned that in places like Texas and some neighborhoods of Dallas, they experiment with AMI levels that are as neighborhood specific as zip codes. And while that would be kind of arbitrary in New York, I think there's a lot between how we do it now and something that is more neighborhood focused so that we can get away from affordable housing for who. I started working for Congressman Serrano in 2013, and that was a question that people were asking then. It's 2020, and we're still having the same conversation. So city programs, state programs, all of them are great, but they need to have teeth for enforcement. So we've got to get serious about putting actual dollars behind these programs. So You mentioned DHCR, great institution in theory, but you've got to hold people accountable. And then I think another opportunity is to really think about how you move people into a space where housing stability is a reality. So we've seen the right to counsel happen on the city level. That's incredible. Bronxites are still getting evicted more than anyone else. We have a huge homelessness issue. The Bronx sends more people into the homeless system than any other borough. And so we're having an issue of, again, programs that are well-intentioned, not working. And so we really have to step back and think critically. And I think coronavirus has really given us the opportunity to say, okay, none of this has been working. How do we think critically about it? And how do we move forward meaningfully? And I'm excited for all levels of government to really be looking really critically at what they can do to advance some of these issues in a real way so that we're not asking the same questions in another 10 years.
Right, and really quickly for our representatives in Albany, what is anything being done to, I guess, make sure that there isn't a big wave of evictions whenever this eviction moratorium ends? I know there's been a lot of confusion over when it will end, et cetera. Anybody able to give me a 20-second update here?
No update other than what we
Go
passed
ahead.
in. Thank you. There hasn't been any additional progress from the bill that we passed several months ago, which is referred to as the Emergency Rent Relief Act. But I will just say that that bill there's an estimate that it will only offer support for between 25,000 and 40,000 New Yorkers, which is very small compared to the over 2 million unemployment number that we know of today. And so nothing that we know of, which is very frustrating. It seems that the calls for the cancellation of rent and the ability to raise revenue, which is a huge part of what we're dealing with right now, because when we entered the budget process, we had a $6.1 billion deficit. Now we're approaching about a $20 billion deficit in the state of New York. Yes, we're waiting for the federal government, but we should not hold our breaths. We have got to do everything that we possibly can here, like raising revenue on our most wealthy New Yorkers who have actually made a profit during this pandemic. And that's one of the ways that we can make sure that when we do cancel rent, we can account for and provide for those New Yorkers who are living on the edge right now.
The tenant safe harbor law, which is my law that I wrote, passed Albany. It was signed by the governor. That will protect many tens of thousands of people. And essentially what it says is that anybody who falls behind in their rent because of COVID, during the emergency, they cannot be evicted, period. They can't be evicted. They can be a monetary judgment against them, which eventually they'll have to pay. But that is going to prevent huge numbers of people from being evicted. But we have to do more than that. The governor has issued some executive orders, but I think we have to go beyond that. And there are many bills out there, including legislation that I have with Senator Kavanaugh, but a number of bills. We don't want to create a new huge homeless crisis because of things that will be beyond the control of people who just fell on bad times because of this remarkable and terrible situation.
Just a few more questions. I'm actually going to pull one, the top question from our audience Q&A right now. And it's about the youth voice in the Bronx. If I remember correctly, the Bronx has the youngest median age of all the boroughs. What are your plans to include the youth voice in how the Bronx recovers from COVID-19? And what opportunities can we expect for young people who want to activate and mobilize and make the borough better? And I'll open that up to, actually, I'll first direct that one to DA Clark. I know you talked about youth before.
I remember to unmute this time. First and foremost, we've done a lot of things in the schools in order to speak to the youth about self-determination and just making themselves safe, keeping away from gangs and things like that. But what has energized me so much that these youth are so involved in their community and they know what they want. And for some reason, we just got to give them the opportunity to tell us. We have to stop talking and we have to start listening to them. Last week, NYPD did a town hall in the Claremont section of the Bronx. Councilmember Gibson was one of the people that was there. And there's a Renaissance Center that's here in the South Bronx. And I know because my nephew used to be a part of them. They do music and dance and everything. Those young people came there not with complaints, but solutions to the NYPD on how they want to be engaged, how they would like to see police act in their community. And one kid got up and says, I go to the precinct community council all the time. I'm the only young member that goes there. Why don't you have representatives of young people on the precinct council meeting? And you know what Chief Madry, the chief of community affairs, said? He said, I don't know why, but guess what? You just got yourself a seat on the precinct community council. These kids are speaking up. They know what they want. It's time for us to start listening to them. I could come up with all kinds of policies, but if I don't understand the young people who are in these communities and sharing their experiences, I couldn't even fathom what it is that they really wanted. So I'm doing all that I can to engage them all the time. And those who end up criminally justice involved, I'm not trying to send them to prison for the rest of their lives. This is an opportunity to reset. See what is it that they need. I talked about the trauma earlier. When I find out that this person went through certain trauma, that's something for me to consider when I'm deciding what does justice look like for this particular individual. So I have alternatives to incarceration. You know, I'm working with you know, different community-based organizations about schools and different programs like that to make sure we could get these young people on the right track, not saddle them with criminal convictions. So that's one of the things that I know I'm doing, and I'm continuing to do it. And I gotta tell you, I'm excited every time I talk to them because they get you so hyped up that you realize, I always realize, this is why I'm doing what I do, because they give me hope. So that's some of the things that I'm trying to do.
Thank you so much.
I just want to piggyback one more time. I was in the teen activist program at the point when I was younger called Action, Activists Coming to Inform Our Neighborhood. I know Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice has an incredible program. You mentioned the Renaissance Youth Center. I think because we are lacking so much of that kind of political infrastructure, a lot of our CBOs step in and do an incredible organizing work on the ground, and they start with young people all the time. And so we have all of these really empowered young people already who do know what they want, who are versed on their issues and even more versed on solutions. And it's on us to make space for them. So I'm so happy to hear that example of a young person on the precinct council. We need more people, more young people on community boards. Also, I think school councils are an opportunity, and we really also re-examine school governance structure. It's incredible to me that we're having a conversation about reopening schools, but not including young people. There's no space for young people or parents to have decision-making power, and that's really a problem. And so I think, again, it's incumbent on us to really think about the ways that we can push our systems to be better and more inclusive and give people vested power in the systems where they have vested.
Agreed. And let me just quickly say I have to give credit. The only reason why we have summer youth and summer camp and Sonic and Compass is because of young people. We started at a point of zero where the administration zeroed out all youth programs. But because of young people mobilizing and getting the city council on board, we have a partial restoration of a summer youth program this summer. So I agree with everything said. Keep pushing, giving young people opportunities and open that door, internships, and many opportunities that we can for young people. But they saved youth programs this summer. Have to give credit.
Now, I wish I had devoted more time to the discussion of education and reopening the schools, but City and State, luckily, is having a virtual education summit next Tuesday. We have a Bronxite, Betty Rosa, the new state education commissioner, is going to be keynoting. So many legislators are going to be talking about education. So please go to cityandstateny.com, sign up for that. It's Tuesday, August 18th, next Tuesday, and it's free. And with that, I want to bring it to our final question. I wish we could go on and on about this. I have like seriously 50 more questions to ask our panelists. We have so many in the Q&A. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. But I know that I, and I'm sure many other of you, are really looking ahead to the 2021 city council elections, the mayor, comptroller, borough presidents. There's so many elections. So I wanted to ask all of our politicians here, all of our panelists here, name one 2021 city council candidate that myself and all of our attendees here should be paying attention to. Name one city council candidate to keep your eye on. So I will start again with Amanda Septimo. Who should we be paying attention to in 2021?
You know, it's unfair and impossible to ask me to name one. So I'm going to break the rules because I'm good at that. You can ask some of my folks in the Bronx. I think that I'm really excited about candidates, of course, like Amanda Farias and Amanda Farias, who's running in City Council District 18 in the Bronx, John Sanchez, who's running in the 15th. I think two really grounded community leaders who have been leading and who will take that energy into the City Council and take the community to the next level. But also excited about Marjorie Velasquez, who recently announced, because I think it's important when women, Marjorie ran in 2017, ran an incredible campaign. It's important for women to step into their power all the time and reclaim it. And I'm excited to see her get it done this time.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Gibson, who are we looking at for a post-COVID Bronx in 2021?
Jeff, that is so unfair to ask us to name one person, and you are going to get us in trouble. So I guess let me just blanketly say I agree with Amanda, but I really think, you know, again, we have to look at all of these progressive women candidates who are running in all of the districts throughout the Bronx. I think it's a really exciting time, and I think people have been energized by the announcement of Kamala Harris as well. Black women, Latinas. I am excited. LGBT candidates are running, trans women. I think it's an exciting time. I wish I could name one person, but as one of the seats that is up for, you know, the election, it's really hard to do that. But I do want to, you know, recognize all the candidates that are running. As someone who's run, it's not easy to run for elected office. It's not easy to raise money and put yourself out there as a candidate. It's a real tall order and a lot of courage and strength and political will it takes to do that. So I wish everyone the very best of luck. And I think we should keep our eyes on all of the women who are running, because you're going to be surprised by 2021.
Right. There's only, I think, 11 or 12 women in the city council now, and that might raise.
12. I'm co-chair of the Women's Caucus. It's only 12. Yeah, 12.
At least it's not 11. Senator Biaggi, one 2021 candidate.
One 21 candidate. Well, first of all, I'm committed to making sure that we have 21 and 21, which means 21 women in the city council. And so my focus is on a lot of the amazing women who are running, Marjorie Velasquez, and also, because I like to make good trouble, Amanda Farias, of course, in the 18th.
Thank you so much. Assemblymember Dinowitz, I have a feeling that you might be supporting one city council candidate, but tell us more.
Tough question, but I'm going to have to go with my Democratic district leader, a union activist by the name of Eric Dinowitz. But I'll go beyond that because you probably want me to name somebody else. And I've looked at who's running throughout the Bronx, and there are actually a lot of good people running. In the Northeast Bronx, there's a young neighborhood activist named Kevin Riley that's running. In the two districts right below me, there are a number of young women that are running. There's really a huge interest in these races. And we do need to elect more women to the city council, but we need to elect the best people no matter what. And I actually looked at the list of elected officials in the Bronx. And contrary to what you may think, on January 1st, there's going to be 39 elected women in office and 38 elected men in office, counting judges, legislators, DAs, borough presidents. So we've made, I mean, it's pretty much 50-50, and we've made huge strides in recent years, and we should never lose sight of that we have to continue to make sure that we have diverse voices reflected in every level of government. But
that
yeah,
is quite an 11th hour sneak in.
Say that again?
I said that's quite an 11th hour sneak in. I feel like we could have a whole segment on this. Jeff, you let us wait too long.
Absolutely, yeah, the 39 women. That's very interesting. I might have to look it up.
A lot of them are judges, but judges are very important. And one of them is the DA.
Speaking of which, yes, I know, District Attorney, I know you don't get as involved in politics as many of the others, but do you have any candidates you're looking at in 2021?
It's not that I don't ask to get involved, that ethically I'm not allowed to get involved. So the DA does not endorse candidates. I can't do that. I have to work with all of them. So I'm excited for anybody who has the courage and the commitment to want to run. So I'm looking forward to anybody who gets elected so that they can help me do the work that I need to do to keep the Bronx safe. Let them bring the resources that they have to join forces with me to make sure that we get the work done. But there are some great candidates out there, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. And I will, most people I would say, yo, you got to give me one, but I understand you have very good reasoning. So
Ethics. Look, I'm a former judge too. Look, I follow the law. That's my job. Okay. I'm not going to violate it.
Our panelists.
And you can't make me violate it.
Thank you so much for joining us. I wish we had more time, but this has been a really great discussion. I'm glad we got to touch on so many things about the future of the Bronx, looking at our youth, looking at our future candidates, looking at crime, looking at building and housing. So many good things. Thank you so much for joining City and State on this event. And I hope all of you can join us for our future events. And thanks again. And now you can go finally catch up on that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris speech that we all missed.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. So long, everyone.